Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first webinar, the series of the CEE webinars dedicated to responsible investing and impact investing. My name is Eva Konchal, and I'm a CEE manager at EVPA, and I will be the host of this webinar and also other webinars that we will be organizing in this series. Before we get into the actual webinar, I just want to give you a couple of technical tips because I know that not all the participants may be familiar with this GoToWebinar setup. So basically, each of you have a control panel on your screen, and then you can use it to see who are the attendees. You can also audio, you can see different functions that are there. What is important is a section which is called chat, and we will be using this chat section for your questions. So if you have any questions that you want to pose to the panelists, to the speakers, please use this chat window, and you can direct them to the all audience actually. So you will see this function. The session is recorded. So those of you who will not be able to stay till the end, you might be able to listen to the recording later on. Few words of introduction about the series. We launched this series together with few partners that I will say a few words about them in a second. We launched this series with an idea that there is still a need for more education and for more of creating a space for more understanding of the concepts of impact investment, responsible investing, ESG as well. We especially want to dedicate this series to the Central European market, but actually also to other emerging markets where this topic is not yet that popular as it is in Western Europe or in other countries in the world. At this point, I really would like to thank our partners with whom we are organizing this series, the Polish Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, that has been also one of the pioneers of the venture philanthropy approach here in Poland, Inspired, which is a consultancy company that is specializing in ESG and sustainability strategies, and Firlej Kastory, which is actually an investment firm that is leveraging private wealth also for impact investments. And I think we can say that Firlej and Kastory is actually one of the first family offices in Central Europe. So on this slide, you can see a couple of topics that we want to tackle through those webinars. And we hope to meet with you and with the increasing group of people interested in this topic over the next couple of months, maybe longer. We plan to do those webinars every Thursday. The format should be standard, but we are also open to new approaches. 1 hour where we will have some theory, some facts and figures, as you will see today, but also we want to give practical examples from practitioners, either coming from Central Europe, because we already have some impact investment practice in Central Europe, or from other countries. Today, we have the organizing team that you can see below, myself, Stasia Kastory from Firlej and Kastory, and Marta Lesiewska. And I'm really happy to have 2 practitioners, 2 speakers at our webinar. Robert Marks, the former managing director from Enterprise Investors and one of the co-founders of the first Polish Venture Philanthropy Fund, and Espen Dahl, who is representing First Social Entrepreneurs, which is actually an impact investment fund from Norway, and you will hear from them practical experience on what does it mean to bring impact investments to actually do investments like that. Briefly, my role is slowly ending in our first webinar. Marta Lesiewska will take over from me in a minute to provide you with some facts and figures on how this space is developing and what is the progress really and what is happening globally, which I hope will give us arguments to engage in impact investment as investors, maybe as creators or developers of the funds, or maybe as direct investors into social enterprises or social businesses. Robert will actually share his personal journey into the space and also providing some examples from the first Polish venture philanthropy fund, but I really hope that it will be more his personal experience and what does it mean to be engaged or to be involved in social investment. And then we'll have Espen there sharing a story of one of the investments that they have made in Norway. At 12, we will finish the official part, and then those of you who may join us will stay for a Q&A that will be led by Staszek Kastor. All right, so our initial plan was actually to show you a trailer from a movie that has been recently done by Sir David Attenborough. Unfortunately, I saw that the streaming doesn't really work very well, so we really want to encourage you to see this movie. David Attenborough has spent 50 years filming and documenting the evolution and the changes in the nature and the environment around the world. And I think this film is a really good introduction into why really traditional investors, companies, should really think even more about moving into this space of responsible investing. So we don't have the trailer, but I hope that those pictures will encourage you to see this movie, also with your children, I think, because it is really a great story on what we as human beings have done to this planet. So without further ado, I invite Marta to give us an introduction into why actually responsible investing can be profitable, and why traditional businesses and companies should be moving into this space. Marta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Eva, and welcome everyone. I'm really sorry. I will let you focus on slides, and I will remain in the background due to some technical issues. In my part, I will take you through why is it important and it's worth to think about responsible and sustainable investments, how to think about it, and in the marketing slang at the end for RTB, so reason to believe, so why is it worth it to think about it, and why we can approach from two sides. One is about values, beliefs, and science, and this is what Sir David Attenborough shows us in the documentary that we really recommend. And the second one is about risk management. So Sir David Attenborough really supports us with the arguments for the idealists, and I even heard that this documentary helped to gain some budget for sustainability initiatives from initially skeptical board member in some medium-sized organization. And the budget is really crucial in the story. This webinar, as Eva mentioned before, is primarily targeted to traditional investors who looks for inspirations and real-life examples to ease their transition into responsible investment world. I know that on the other side of the screen, we have a lot of corporate representatives as well, and that's good, because to make change happen, we need collaboration from both sides. And working as a consultant in the CEE region, I learned that non-pressure on the companies in terms of development of their sustainability practices is more effective than the one that comes from financial sector. But it takes a lot to change the consensus, and as you will see further today, in the CEE region, we are still at the beginning of this journey. However, we don't need to pose the same "is it worth it" questions that dominated discussion in developed markets 10, 15 years ago. We have answers. And one answer is the risk management. Investment and business leading is about risk management. On this slide, we can see the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report. And for years or even decades, business leaders, investors, business schools were focused on financial and geopolitical risk. This is this post-Cold War landscape that we got used to through the years. However, like the tightening regulations, international standards, technology, communication advancements, just pushed some of those issues a little bit further. And traditional economic risk disappeared from the top 5 risks to the business and the world's economy. Now, climate risks, such as biodiversity, climate action failure, extreme weather, human-made environmental disasters, like including plastic pollution, tops the risk agenda. So the climate issues affects the supply chain, social problems, political stability, and ignoring nature and sustainable development requirements led us to the situation we have today, including wildfires, including extreme weather, floods, and COVID-19. And all those problems cannot be solved without private sector contribution. OECD estimates that to reach Paris Agreement goals, the annual investment of $6.9 trillion is needed. In 2018, climate finance reached for the first time $500 billion, and nearly 60% came from the private sector. Can I have a next slide, please, Eva? So if we explored why, let's move now to how and take a close look at the responsible investing landscape. Here we have our hosting institution EVPA spectrum that stretches from traditional philanthropy on the left through venture philanthropy approach in the middle, and that's the model that definitely a lot of corporate foundations should consider if they're aim to build and support like local communities and social infrastructure. And on the right side, we have investing with impact and responsible investing solutions. And in this webinar series, we will focus on those last two. So this spectrum starts with something like giving a fish, goes through offering a fishing rod to changing how the fisheries operate. And let me now look closely and explore responsible and sustainable and impact investing options. Can I have a next slide, please? Thank you. So this is approach and we are trying to answer the question how. And there are like different shades and different strategies to approach responsible or sustainable investment. The spectrum starts on the right side, left side of the screen, with negative screening and exclusion. The main goal of this strategy is to eliminate risk and controversy and protect the value and reputation of the fund. Here we have all no oil, zero carbon, no tobacco examples of the investment and portfolios. Sustainable finance takes one step further through the implementation of ESG integration policies, active stewardship strategies that are expected not only to mitigate ESG risks, but also enhance the value of the investment. Another level is thematic and impact investing. In this case, investors aims to address social challenges and generate competitive financial returns at the same time. Here we have examples of investments into companies that are focused on solving plastic issues and problem of clean water access, those focused on renewables, energy, or women entrepreneurship. We will look at these examples also during the whole series. So is it worth to mention here, and I would like to highlight that to make this graph alive, effort for both sides or different sides of the market is needed. So we need funds, banks, institutional and private investors ready to engage in ESG issues and understand those a little intangible aspects of social impact. But on the other hand, we need also corporates and social entrepreneurs prepared to measure their impact and deliver credible data. And ESG framework is pretty helpful to do this. And there is also a lot of ready frameworks about impact management that comes really, really handy. So we have a lot of tools already that we can use to develop responsible and social and sustainable investing space. May I have the next slide? So numbers, here we have the numbers, and they pretty well reflect the fact that it's easier to say than do. Global Sustainable Investment Review analysis demonstrates the evolution of responsible investing in the most advanced regions. In Europe, and here we are talking mostly about Western Europe, negative screening has long traditions, and it's better represented than ESG integration that is, for example, more popular in the US. But we can see here that the more sophisticated tools, the less popular they are. And can I have the next slide, please? It's also worth to note the dynamic growth or SRI strategies. In recent years, except from norms-based screening, each of those instruments, we can see a double-digit or even triple-digit gains. And now we have also the investment space is, the numbers may differ as we have different methodologies, but we are talking something about from $3 to $30 trillion in sustainable, responsible and investment and socially responsible investment strategies worldwide in terms of assets. But the trend is clear. Year to year, all those strategies are actually gaining more attention and are becoming more and more popular. Next slide, please. So yes, we can see also from this slide that the trends are pretty clear. Grants, loans, equity, debt issuance are directly connected with SDGs or positive intended social or environmental impact became more and more popular every year. It changes the financial sector slowly. However, the slow change in the markets that have responsible or sustainable finance instruments in place for decades may turn out pretty rapid on the markets like Central and Eastern Europe. And it's expected that assets in sustainable investment products in Europe will outnumber conventional funds just in 2025. And this has really a lot of consequences in terms of how investors should be prepared for that, how they should be prepared to work with ESG data, with the impact data, how they should approach the sustainable investment, but it also creates consequences for the many companies in terms of transparency and metrics and data collection. And we are facing those strategies now and problems. Can I have a next slide? So those sustainable or responsible finance instruments were closely analyzed in the last decade, and they proved to be profitable and more resilient. On the left side of the screen, we can see Morgan Stanley analysis that proves that sustainable funds deliver better and higher returns than traditional funds where market faces high volatility. Also in 2018, Bank of America found that firms with better ESG score than their peers produce higher 3-year returns. They were as well more likely to become high quality stocks and less likely to have large price decline, as well to go bankrupt. Companies integrating an ESG approach recognized by investors and ESG funds has been also more resilient in the recent crisis. The MSCI World Index dropped 14.5% in March this year, but 62% of large cap ESG funds outperformed the index. So it doesn't really matter how we answer the why question, those numbers, and it really doesn't matter if behind those strategies were hope for a better future, investors' pressures, risk management opportunities. Actually, we can see that it pays off and it creates more risk it creates better risk management strategy, and it's still profitable to invest in those funds and to sustainability. Next slide, please. Also, but it also requires the knowledge and extra resources from different backgrounds, and it's not easy for the whole market to actually adjust and to follow this more responsible and sustainable and impact investing lead. As this graph illustrates, we have nearly 9,000 private equity firms that operate globally with asset under management of $3.4 trillion, but only less than 10% are signatories of principles for responsible investment. Of those, less than half developed their own responsible investment policies, and only 16 in this very far small end and small dot in the end of the graph actually fully disclose how ESG affects the financial performance of their portfolio companies. And this is also like the different aspects can affect it. One thing is sophisticated tools that are needed to disclose this aspect. The second thing is that still this is treated as competitive advantage. And in the CEE market, can I have a next slide maybe here? So in our Central and Eastern Europe market, we have few examples of responsible and impact investing initiatives and strategies. We have Valores and social venture capital in Poland. We have Nest Fund in the CEE. We have transparent and responsible investing policies with ESG scoring methodologies like the one introduced recently by Abris Capital. And those examples focus a lot of attention, but they are not enough to make a statement. And we can see it clearly on this graph that our region is a empty space, and we really would like that after this series of webinar, it will color up a little bit on a different color and shade, definitely different shade of gray. So when we were preparing this introduction, we were looking for numbers and examples to show the big picture in CEE. Unfortunately, the scale of ESG related investments and responsible investing in our region is unknown. The number of funds and financial products with sustainability focus is pretty low. We can see the strong focus now on ESG reporting by companies in Poland and Central and Eastern Europe. However, also the level of the disclosure is lower than in developed markets. But the mechanism and awards for disclosing are exactly the same as in developed markets, as companies with high and improving disclosure deliver still high equity returns or higher equity returns than their peers. So we are facing a lot of challenges, but there is also a lot of market opportunity. And here is the time when I will give voice back to Eva, and she will tell more about the opportunities over here. And then we will introduce our distinguished guest who will say more about what we can do about it. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marta. I think we got enough of numbers in terms of, showing us that really responsible investing and investing for impact is the way to go. This last slide is really an argument to show you that things are changing in Central Europe, and it hasn't been the landscape like that a couple of years ago. So we have a couple of venture philanthropy funds that Marta already mentioned, and then we already have some impact investment funds that are also using debt and equity instruments and are seeking to invest in social businesses or businesses with impact in Central Eastern Europe. So I encourage you all to check those funds online. Also, some of them we will be inviting to speak at our webinars. So that would be our theoretical part of the webinar. And right now I would like to invite Robert Mans to share his story and his engagement in venture philanthropy and impact investment space. So Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eva. So Eva asked me to tell you more from a personal side, how I got involved in this space, and hopefully it will be some words of encouragement for others. So just as a background, because I'm going to come to this a couple of times, I've been in the private equity industry for 30 years, all of that time with enterprise investors in Poland and Central Europe. I was also the founding president of the Polish Private Equity Association, known as PSIK, and spent 15 years on the board there. And to round it out at the level of Europe, in the Invest Europe Trade Association, I was the founder of the Central European Task Force and chaired that for 17 years, just recently stepped down. I'll come back to why that's sort of relevant. But starting from a personal side, about 10 years ago, or even longer, about 10, 15 years ago, I was in my mid-40s, doing pretty well professionally, and doing some kind of charity work, let's say, so little things here and there, working with the local orphanage and so on. But I felt that really it was time to dedicate some more effort to this area and really start giving back to society in some way. And I was looking for a really interesting way to do that. And I had the good fortune at a number of private equity conferences to run into a guy named Doug Miller, who was actually one of the founders of EVPA. And he was an expert in the venture philanthropy methodology and philosophy. And I really found that whole approach to be very, very attractive to someone like me, because venture philanthropy comes from the idea of venture capital management, translated into philanthropy. So quite easy for somebody from the private equity venture capital space to understand. I was lucky to have him as my mentor. And, what I could see from that is a very effective way to engage, to try to generate social impact using, first of all, skills, contacts, know-how, knowledge, and secondly, putting money to work in a very kind of effective, controllable way. So very similar to private equity investing, where you watch your money, you engage with your money, you try to work with organizations to help them grow and develop. So I found this extremely appealing and attractive, and a natural kind of transition from my day-to-day professional career. So what happened? After a couple of discussions with Doug and some people in the industry, and this is why my kind of industry thing is important, because I saw that not only could this be appealing perhaps to me, but to many of my colleagues in the private equity industry. And at that time, we were almost more than 20 years developed as a private equity industry in Poland and Central Europe, relatively doing well. It was just after the global financial crisis, and I thought it could be a way to engage others from the industry as well. So what happened was, and Eva, you can go to my first slide. I, together with a colleague named Piotr Nocen, we set up the philanthropy committee of the Polish Private Equity Association. And the first step was to set up something called the Social Business Accelerator program. And we set this up in 2011. It was a joint venture with actually Ewa Konczal, who at that time was heading Ashoka. So the first couple of years, it was a joint venture with Ashoka. And what I call this cash-free venture philanthropy. So this was based totally on pro bono engagement by private equity professionals. We basically set up a platform that is kind of plug and play, where we at the core select social organizations that we think can have potential to grow, scale up, improve their impact, become more viable with some professional business assistance. And at that time, by the way, you know, we had thought about a venture philanthropy fund, but going around the industry and talking to colleagues, it was a bit too early. People were really not that familiar with the social sector, what's possible, not really ready to contribute money towards it. So we thought, okay, let's gain familiarity first and prove that people with a background from private equity venture capital can really make a difference. And the goal here was really to work with those organizations. It's one-on-one pro bono support with leaders and social entrepreneurs. And the goal is to help those organizations be better, bigger, more sustainable, and start really developing their impact management and measurement practices. So you can see on this slide what's happened so far. Over all this time, we've just started the 9th annual edition. We've worked with almost 80 social organizations, and we've gotten just about 60 private equity professionals to engage as mentors. And I should just add that the qualification is you have to be a senior person in the industry. So you have to have at least 10 years of private equity or venture capital industry experience, and you have to be ready to engage. So the minimum is 1 meeting a month with your social organization, but in practice, it probably turns out to be more like a half a day to a day per month that is spent. And we get what was very interesting here is it's really a massive engagement by the whole industry. I think the social organizations, we do surveys, and we know that they get a lot out of this program. They have a confidential business advisor that they really can't get anywhere else, and we can see results. But I think the mentors, the private equity professionals, also get a lot of value out of that. And I can tell you that in the beginning, we were, you know, I'm the chief recruiter of those mentors. And in the beginning, it was a lot of hand twisting, arm twisting, and so on. These days, I get a lot of thank yous for thanking to invite to the program. So I think people really get a lot of benefit. Eva has switched to the next slide, which is Valores. Valores is the what came out of the SBA program. So in 2014, we got a lot of feedback from the mentors that their organizations could benefit from an additional layer of venture philanthropy support, which is money. So we decided to then set up the fund, Valores. It's the first VP fund for Poland. We had a lot of momentum because of all this engagement going on. What makes Valores unique is, you can see here, we've done 2 fundraisings so far, a total of 1.25 million euros raised. It's contributed only by private individuals. So we have no corporates, no public money. It's purely like-minded, private equity related in some way, which includes law firms and other individuals who support private equity industry. So that really gives us a very kind of understanding crowd when we are talking to them about our goals. And so far, well, the program of Valores is to take certain organizations from SBA and work with them in a 3-year program where we follow the EVPA 3 pillars, which are basically financial support, non-financial support, and impact measurement and management. And so far we have supported, we brought 12 organizations into the portfolio. We've exited 4 of them, and 8 of them are currently now in the portfolio. And the way we, and by the way, this was co-founded with quite a few private equity colleagues. Some of them I hope are on this call. They were supposed to be like Stanislav Kafnevsky, Eric Halgren, and many others. And of course, Eva Konchal is very much involved as the chairman of the board. And the way we talk about this, even though this is venture philanthropy, we talk about this through an investment language. So we see this as an investment fund. The goal here, our profit coming from this is not financial profit, it's social profit. So we are looking to maximize social impact. Our goal working with these organizations is to help to make them sustainable and viable, first of all, more professional, have them grow and scale up and really measure and management their impact. And this is what our donors are looking for. This is what our supporters look for. We call them investors. And when we work with those organizations, we ask them to develop 3-year business plans. We work with them to do that, and we manage them over the life of the engagement, setting up both impact and operational KPIs that are then used to manage the success and the outcomes. It's a very lean organization, I have to say. We have maybe in total 1.5 total FTEs. So we really want the money to go to the organizations and not spend a lot of overhead, which we can do very easily when we have individual donors. So you can see on my last slide here, what has evolved from this is an ecosystem where we select social organizations that we think have promise. And by the way, these are primarily NGOs. We bring them into the SBA program. We are now running the largest edition ever this year with 22 organizations and 22 or 23 mentors. We work with them over a couple of years, some shorter, some longer. We then basically select or cherry pick the ones that we think have really scale potential and bring them into the Valores program. And what this slide doesn't really communicate is the engagement of people and professionals in this. So the mentor that starts with them at the SPA level continues with them through the whole period of Valores engagement. Plus we have our board at Valores, which is about 6 or 7 individuals who are also engaging directly with those organizations. And then on an as needed basis, we engage pro bono support by law firms, marketing firms, recruiters, headhunters, et cetera, to support the individual organizations. So that's kind of what things have evolved to. I think we're very proud of where we are. We try to stay very focused. But actually, Eva, while I continue talking, if you can go back to one of your earlier slides with the spectrum of investments, not the EVPA spectrum, but that second slide, I would like to leave that up while I continue talking, because I'm going to refer to that. What you can see from the Valores example is something that's on the far right of the slide that you're about to see. Yeah, this one. So we're pretty much at the far right of this chart, and I would say traditional private equity investing now with a strong emphasis on ESG is not on the all the way left side of this, but in the responsible investing, more and more moving into sustainable investing, those 2 columns there. And what's clear from the data that was presented earlier is that in Central Europe, we have a gap in between. There's very few social impact funds out there. In Poland, there's basically none. I mean, there's one mentioned on the slide, but it's really not very big. And this is 6 years after we started Valores, and we don't even have a second, maybe we have a second venture philanthropy fund, but not much to speak of. There's a big void here. There's a big gap. We're definitely lagging behind Central Europe. Eva asked me, why is that? And I think it's I would characterize it as a chicken and egg supply demand problem. So I think by getting engagement on the people side, we're getting more interest in this space. On the other hand, there's not a lot of product to engage with. There's Valores, there's a couple of things, but we don't see big activity or large numbers of impact funds, focusing on some of these different columns and different types of impact investing. I do hope that this story will evolve like the private equity industry evolved over the last 30 years, where when I started back in 1990, there was nothing on the ground, and it all had to be built and grown. And I think discussions like this and engagement by EVPA and local associations and people will hopefully evolve that. So in parting comments, I would like to encourage people on this call, I see we have almost 90 people here, to engage in this way. And what I mean by that is impact investing, from the left side of this chart to the right side of this chart, which includes venture philanthropy. This is professional investing. This is not your parents' idea of giving to charity. You know, that's all great, but this is really an appealing, attractive professionalization of seeking impact in a very effective way. There are multiple entry points, you know, into this field, and I would encourage you to look at this segmentation of the market as kind of a portfolio development, a personal portfolio development. It really depends on your preferences, your goals as individuals. For some of you on this call, maybe as corporations. So your preferences, your goals, your willingness to engage. If I apply myself to this chart, you know, I'm at the right side of this. That's where I really started. That's where I'm still mostly focused. My preference and goals was to maximize impact. I was not looking for a financial return in money. I was looking for a return in the way of impact and trying to build sustainability around that. But myself as well, I'm also looking now into moving left on this chart and looking for single investments into social businesses or funds. But I think, you know, before there's a big choice here, we're going to have to see some more startup activity on the fund side. So as a final kind of encouragement to engage, I would say, you know, look at how you can engage. It can be as simple as contribute your time, contribute your skills. That can be like we do in Valores on a social organization, you know, NGO level. It could be working with social businesses. It could be, for example, volunteering to become an investment committee member of an impact fund that's starting up. What I think the key takeaway here is this whole methodology is about responsible investing and trying to generate impact in a professional way. And I really encourage all of you to go out there and engage and look at diversifying your own life portfolio to engage in this spectrum. Thank you very much. 15 minutes.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much. This was really great. Thank you for the encouragement, and I hope that the audience will get the message, and we hope that through this series of webinars we will be able to also show the ways how to engage directly. So I would like to ask our next presenter, Espen, to take the floor. Espen, I just made you a presenter, so you should be able to share your screen.
Okay.
If you click
so
the screen, if you click this, oh, perfect, super.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited to speak to you about some of the experiences that we have had in trying to do what Robert just said, trying to find both a financial and a social return from these investments and treat these as real and proper investments, not as a philanthropic gift or something you do to compensate for making a financial return elsewhere. And I would like to start just to give you a little flavor of what Ferd is. It's a family-owned Norwegian investment company, one of the largest companies of its type in Northern Europe, with an equity base of about 3.2 billion Norwegian kroners. It's a traditional investor. It invests across a range of many different asset classes, but it has a kind of top-line vision of creating enduring value and leaving clear footprints. So right from the onset, Ferd is a company that has an ambition to do much more than just create a financial return for its family owner. And one of the unusual things about Ferd is that we have organized this as a normal investment group, but you see the social entrepreneur side, the one to the right here, is on par with the stock exchange investments and the property and all these other things. So this is in Norwegian, but is basically on par with everything else. So it's not treated as a foundation or a trust that you put money into to fund other things. It's part of core business. And one of the other unusual things is that we don't do this through a fund. This is part of, again, of the core structure. So we don't have other people's money, and we don't have a fixed holding period. We don't have limited partners and LPA agreements that limit our freedom to invest here. We invest across an impact spectrum in things that make sense to us, and we hold them for as long as we can create value, and we have large freedom as to what we want to engage with. Okay, I'll start with kind of a little bit of my personal journey. I started straight out of university in England in the mid-90s. I started in environmental strategy consulting and renewable energy investment. And although it was great fun and we made some good investments, the progress was extremely slow. And we were among the only firm, this was a company called Impacts, one of the only firms that actually saw the opportunity here. And I'm just really pleased to see that the momentum is building and that the trend is shifting. And people like Robert and myself who've been in this for 25 years, I think we see a tremendous change. So the opportunity has been there for a long time, but the change is coming now. And yes, Poland may not have picked up the opportunity yet, but I think you have a great opportunity to do so going forward. I trained as an engineer, and I also trained in business. And for me, kind of solving the planet issues was obvious. We want to have a just society. We want to create opportunities for all and do it within the kind of the boundaries of a healthy planet. But it's not an easy thing to do. And for me, it wasn't really until the Sustainable Development Goals came along in 2015 that I got the tools and that we have the platform for this to kind of all come together. And Ferd had been working in sustainable investing for 6 years before that, but I think the momentum really picked up once the Sustainable Development Goals made this understandable to a much larger audience. And along with it came the question: okay, so you want to save the planet, but can you make a profit at the same time? And this dilemma, I think we have demonstrated it on a small scale. Other people are demonstrating it on a larger scale, but we come to the spectrum. This is essentially what the same visual that Robert presented and that Martin presented. It shows a spectrum of investments from pure capitalism on the left here to pure philanthropy on the right. And for me, what this says is that whereas before we were looking at financial profit as the only goal, now we can broaden our toolkit, broaden our investment focus. It has a lot of opportunity for people to say, well, I want a bit of this, I want this risk, I want this financial profit, and I want to do something good in the process. And for me, choice creates opportunity. So this is an opportunity for people to really find the right risk-reward balance. Exciting times. We at Fed Social Entrepreneurs have our own risk opportunity focus on the venture philanthropy side of things. We invest in companies that are social first, so the impact is at the core, but we want them to have a economic profit so that they can do more. So the scaling is through an economic engine. They are encouraged to create a profit and to reinvest it. We as investors, we may get a profit at some point, but that is clearly not the driver. We encourage the company to reinvest to create more impact, and that's at the core. And we have been in the EVPA since the start. We are following all sorts of impact management practices. We do all the reporting, same as Robert really advocate. I'm not going to go into that, but we are a true EVPA supporter in the sense that venture philanthropy and the methodology is at the core of what we do. I want to just say that we don't have a financial return expectation. So when our board makes an investment decision, they're not pushing us for a IRR at all. And we are often only the only investor, the first investor in a company, and we are often left to kind of set the scene and set the tone for our investment. And over the last 11 years, we have grown from 2 to 6 employees. We have invested actively in, I think it's 26 companies now, but we've supported more than 60 financially. And we do a combination of impact management support, financial support, and non-financial support. And that means the whole range, from mentoring to strategy consulting to fundraising to corporate governance, the whole menu, if you like. Okay. And again, this is about choice, and we are a hands-on investor, so we can't really get involved in solving all problems for all people. We have chosen Norway and the Nordics as a geographic area because we are so hands-on. It wouldn't make sense for us to resource-wise to travel all over the world and try to solve third world problems. We are focused on local issues where we can create a big social impact. And there's an innovation element to what we do. So we try to find things that inspire and change and break from the standard. And we're looking for sustainable business models. So anything from creative ways of getting in and working with the government, social impact bonds. And we really try to tailor both our approach and the financing to meet the needs of the ultimate target group. So that's kind of, again, the backdrop. And scaling, we want our companies to scale in the Nordics, either copy paste or volume, getting more done. But we also want them to look outside of Norway and scale outside of Norway. Okay. And I'll go back to the SDGs. For me, the decent work and economic growth SDG really has bringing those together. I think is very hard, but it's also one of the most rewarding when you can actually find an opportunity that is social at heart yet profitable. That really changes the mindset of the whole ecosystem. It changes the mindset of us as investors. It changes. It gives us a story that we can tell. I'm going to tell you a great story, and I'm not bullshitting. This is not fake news. This is a great story. I'll try to kind of bring it back to how you can do something similar. Okay, this is a company called Medarbeiderne. It means co-workers. They hire people straight from drug rehab, and these are not your casual cannabis smokers on the weekend. These are people who have multiple years of heavy drug use. They have been totally excluded from society. Some of them have never worked. They've broken with their families. They've disappointed their friends, and they're in rehab and they're coming out. And what do? Okay, so this company said, well, we want to employ these people and give them trust and opportunity, and to allow them to show their worth and get back into society. And we're going to do it profitable, and we're going to make sure that we gradually take them off social support, so that we don't do this with any government funding or whatever. We want to make a profitable company without financial support. Now, you may say, well, this is just not possible. These people they have a history of not showing up for work, stealing from their employers, being totally useless as staff in a normal business. Yet this business, Medarbeiderne, is built around these only. Okay, so every function, apart from like the one guy who started it, they're all with a serious drug history. Okay, so what do these guys do? They collect household waste, this sort of stuff that you could go to your recycling station if you were bothered: glass, metal, packaging, electronics, light bulbs, Nespresso capsules, whatever. And they do have a removals agency, and they do cleaning services. And this little picture in the bottom here, this is the start in 2011, and I will increase the size. This is the CEO in red here and a former drug addict, and they are collecting glass bottles with a hand-pulled trolley in 2011. And you can ask yourself, how is this going to become a sustainable commercial business? And this guy had the belief. He said, look, this by showing trust, we can expand our services and we can create something valuable. And he has been extremely diligent, extremely good at publishing his results, being totally open, creating structures that really inspire trust, and it's about structure. So he's added great structure. I'll go back. This company doesn't hire people to deliver services. They deliver services to hire people. So whenever they can expand the operations, they hire more people. And I could have just shown you one graph, one slide, this one. 2011, hand-pulled cart, 2 people, 38 customers, going through the motions of adding more, adding more, adding more, until at the end, in 2020, they have more than 3,000 subscribers who pay a monthly fee for these former drug addicts to come on their door and collect their bottles and espresso capsules and light bulbs. Now, and it's a profitable business, so they're paying around 25 euros per month for this. And in addition, they have expanded, as I said, into cleaning and removals. And you can say, well, a former drug addict, are they going to be strong enough to do this? Of course they are. These people really, really, really care about their jobs, and they put in an effort because they're given the trust and the structure. So I'm happy to report, you see the top right here, you see the map of where these guys collect in Norway, in Oslo. It's all over the city. It's structured into collection routes. These people have responsibility for selling. They actually show up on the door and sell these services. They run them. They drive the cars. Again, people with drug habits, do they have a license? Well, some of them have managed to keep their license, and they're given the trust with expensive machinery. Now there are 35 people in this company with a drug abuse history, and this company is profitable without any subsidy of grants. And the story to the bottom here, guy was unemployed for 18 years, and now he's got a permanent job. And the difference between getting a paycheck from a real company for a service that pays, that somebody actually buying something from you, the difference between that and getting a social support check is just tremendous for the whole self-belief, self-worth. And these people are getting back in touch with their families. They're rebuilding their lives through real jobs. And as a company, Medarbeiderne, you can see here there's a 100% line. That's where they became profitable. So somewhere mid-2019, they became profitable. They cover all their costs with their own generated revenue. And even in Corona times, this is August 2020, they're on par with what they did last year. So they're still growing despite the Corona. And again, you can see on the right here, the social results. They track the number of hours worked, they do number of people, they do full-time employees, they do a whole set of KPIs that they measure and manage the business by. And when you ask them, how do you know that this is a success? They will tell you exactly how many subscribers, exactly how many hours worked. They have these things on their fingertips. The whole company is motivated and driven by this. So to me, this is a great inspiration. We have been part of this journey from 2011. We gave them some support in starting up. We gave them took them into our portfolio about 4 years ago, and we have given them some grants in order to get to where they are now. And we think that this company will continue to grow. It can be copied elsewhere. It can be started in Poland. I'm sure you have people with the same social problems. And as a model, as long as you do this with structure and trust, and you have room to fail, then I think this is doable. And it just shows you can take something that's totally implausible and turn it into a great company. It's financially profitable, and great social results. So I'll finish off with a slide on my inspiration and what I think is a good starting point. And this is the new economics. This is finding the space between the ecological ceiling that you see at the outer rim of the donut here and the basic needs of humanity. And within that boundary, there is so much opportunity to create real business. And this woman, Kate Raworth, she's an Oxford doctor, and she worked in Oxfam and has a kind of a both a hardcore economics background, but also a social investing background. And she brings it all together for me. I think this is where there's opportunity going forward, and this is where the social development goals can kind of help us find where we as investors want to direct our effort. So I'll leave you with that. Hopefully you can get the momentum going in Poland and create some great social businesses.
Thank you so much, Espen. This was really great. I think what is really interesting, what you told me off the side, is that actually you are considering an equity investment now with this company, right? Because it has developed and grew, right? So in a way, your grant support worked as a kind of initial starting capital that many startups would call that, we collect funding from family, fools, and friends. So in a way, I think sometimes venture philanthropy funds work exactly as those family, fools, and friends, right? That we provide this startup capital. Often it has to be grant to start with, and develop the companies to a level where actually either you as first, because you have the financial tools to do that, you come up with another financial instrument because this business is profitable, or those companies, they actually exit, right, the philanthropy funds, venture philanthropy funds, and they can become actually investees of impact investment funds where they can take debt instruments or equity. So thank you for this example. This is really great. I encourage the participants to post the questions if you have, because actually right now we are moving into the Q&A to our panelists. So if any of you want to leave, because you have to leave from this formal part, but now we move to the Q&A. So thank you for those that will leave us, if anyone will leave us, actually, for staying with us. And I now give the floor to Staszek Kastory to take the questions. I don't know if you had the chance to check the chat, if there were any questions, but I know that you also have some questions. So Staszek, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Eva. Thank you for the introduction at the beginning, and Espen, Robert, thank you very much for your presentation, because it was very interesting to listen to the real story of how you got involved in impact investing. Eva, maybe I'm not sure if our participants, attendees, are able to actually ask questions, because there may be some issue with that. What I suggest, I will start with a few questions that I have, but maybe later we could turn on the microphone to check if that's not an issue. Gentlemen, first of all, thank you for sharing your private story. I think that's something that's the most important, because what I see, what I experience in Poland is that a lot of people divide their activity into two parts. So one it's business, and and another one is philanthropy. So there is no connection between those two worlds, and that needs to change. So the impact investing is, from my perspective, the way to change. But the biggest obstacle is the mentality. It's the mentality of people. It's the perspective. Do you have any thoughts of how to change this mentality and show that actually we can connect these two words and not separate them even more?
I can offer my 2 cents worth. I think there are some individuals or groups that stand out and who take a role as leading lights in this. And we have had great use from our owner. He's been very, very visible. And I think also in the EVPA context, you have individuals who go out and really fly the flag for impact investing, share the stories. That helps. And if they can get into the mainstream media and show the cases where you can combine both, then that inspires. So part of what we do is we try to inspire and share. And again, we share our stories, but we share our tools. We have a try to bring as many investors into this as possible. It's a very, very different mindset. Whereas in traditional private equity, you compete for deals. Here, we are actually saying, look, if you want to get in on some of our deals, feel free. We'd love to have you there. If we can learn from you, you can learn from us. And I think that collaborative environment is really healthy.
Okay.
I guess my comment would be, I think it's an evolutionary process. If I look at what we've done with the SBA program and then Valores, as I said before, things have to come when people are kind of ready to engage, and to help them engage in kind of a way that's that they're ready to do it. And what I mean by that is, for example, when we started with SBA, nobody was ready to put money into a venture philanthropy fund. We tried it. That was the first step. We had Doug Miller here in Poland. We had lunch meetings with private equity professionals, and it was just clear that this was a no-go. This was 10 years ago. And then, as I said, when Valores was founded, it was actually the reverse. We had the mentors who were working with the social organizations coming back and saying, you know, that idea we had in that lunch a long time ago, maybe that makes sense now. And also just getting familiarity with the space and what's possible and what's achievable. So I really think, like here in Poland, you know, these things just take time sometimes. But I agree with what Espen said earlier. You know, today, looking at the landscape of what's being done, what's possible, you know, we can look at these segmentation charts and see where the impact investment landscape is lacking. I think we're just talking about it in a completely different way than we did 10 years ago. And I think at least here in Poland, you know, we've got 60 people who are more ready for that discussion. Just as an example, out of those 60 mentors that we've had, 20 of them went on to become donors to Valores. So, and I know a number of them are looking into and thinking about how to get engaged with, you know, more financially driven impact investing efforts, and some startups and so on. So I think it's happening. It happens slowly. What would probably help if there was more, let's say, institutional corporate kind of push. Just like in private equity, if somebody's offering you money to invest, it's hard to refuse. So I know there are some corporates on the line, and if they have some budgets and are willing to kind of really take some risk and be in the ground floor, or like organizations like EIF, I know, who's really trying to make some things happen in this space, and they have in certain countries. I think those efforts together will, you know, continue to evolve and hopefully increase the landscape.
I will get back to the corporate efforts. We have one question regarding measurement of impact. Actually, from all the conferences I've been and all the talks I've listened to, and the measurement actually is the biggest issue. It's something that it's really hard to. It's easy to measure financials, and investors are used to the financials, and that they would like to have such similar models in case of impact, to just feel it and really see if it's developing. And so Robert, it's actually the question to you. How does Valores measure social impact and decide about the exits? You said that you had already a few exits, and so what was the strategy behind that? How did you measure the impact aspect?
This has got to be the most challenging element of all of this, quite honestly. I think there are some available tools on the market to try to do this. It's the thing we struggle with and really try to focus on the most, is how to measure impact in a particular organization. We are, with Valores, we are really focused on very tough social issues. So we do that on purpose. We're talking from, supporting handicapped persons to ex-convicts to children in the orphanage, in the in that system, and them getting out of there, people with intellectual disabilities, etc. And it's not an easy question. I think we've adopted the approach of tailoring it specifically to each organization. And yes, we start with the typical kind of qualitative KPIs, like, how many people are you engaged with, how many, how have you scaled up the number of people, participants, et cetera, et cetera. But we really are working on it. We've actually now outsourced some of that to some university people to come up and applied some of our money specifically to pay for measurement programs to really look at how that impacts the life of the people who are engaged with. We have a debate constantly of, is it better to engage with more socially excluded persons and try to help them, or at a more superficial level, or more deeply with a smaller number of individuals? Like the example that Espen gave, I think is a perfect example of that. You could sit here and say, wow, 35 people, is that really a lot? But my guess is that those 35 people, their lives have changed completely, and that can continue scaling up. So we really try to dig deeper and say, how have those lives changed, short-term, long-term? It's very hard to measure long-term because it depends on reporting and so on. But the short answer to your question is, we are really trying to calibrate those tools and measurements in cooperation with the social organization to see what is the desired outcome and can we find the right way to measure it. And it's a lot of hard work to do it. It's really hard because you have to measure change in people's lives. So it depends a lot on surveys and these kind of qualitative things that are subjective, but that's what we're trying to do. And we have done that with the exited organizations. In some cases, we've really seen how it has changed the lives of people who are in those programs versus did not participate in those programs. And we think it's making a difference, but it's not an easy one. That's true.
Espen, do you have? Could you share with us your thoughts on the measurement issue? How do you approach it, especially with your investments in the companies that are actually profitable and are generate business in the from the traditional perspective? So, how do you think about it?
I think we also struggle with the kind of deep and wide issue. You can really create tremendous change for small groups of people if you go deep in, but you may not be able to get it wide enough. So the deep or wide impact question is always at the core of what we think about these things. We try to find KPIs, key performance indicators, that are relatively simple and relatively easy to communicate. So we try to say, well, what's at the core? And we spend a lot of time thinking through something called a theory of change. So if you do this activity, you can count these results. These are the tangible things you can count. And then you look at, well, okay, what does that mean? What sort of change, what sort of outcome does that give? And then you can bridge that over to the social impact. So using proof down the line or research or whatever. So it goes from activity to output to outcome to impact. And that, if you think of it that way, it's kind of, if you do this, then what? And then you reiterate, you go back and say, well, if I tweak this, maybe the things I measured, I don't need all of these things. I can make do with 2 or 3 key measurements. And you really build a cause-effect relationship between the key performance indicators in your business, and you take it down to say, well, I can understand this business if I just understand these 3 things. You can measure all the others if you want to, but these 3 things will actually guide me through key decisions I have to make. And And to give you an example, we have another company that employs people with Asperger's or autism. We can run that business by saying, okay, what's the utilization rate? Okay, so if the utilization rate, what percentage of my available working hours is actually paid for by clients? Because then you know whether you have enough people or too few. You know whether you have a lot of people sitting on the bench who you need to create additional value for, to work with. So you can actually kind of boil it down to some of the key performance indicators, and the key is the word.
That's actually, I wanted to ask about it, and you mentioned it now. I have from privately, my cousin has Asperger's syndrome, and I talked with him recently many times because he's 20 or 21 right now, and he's looking for a job. And because his issue is connected to problems with writing and reading, mostly he can read, he can write, but it's not something, the tool he can use for everyday work. He's really struggling with, especially with the trust from the potential employees, employers, sorry, that he will be able to actually work as good as any other employee. So I really see how people with such syndromes as Asperger are struggling to get work in Poland, and there is a lot of things that should be done that would allow them to just work on a daily basis like everyone else. You know what, I wanted to ask, because to go back a little bit to my first question, to ask about mentality, but I was thinking a lot about the impulse, who should give the impulse, and you've mentioned EIF. That's for sure. It's a European Investment Fund that for sure is doing great job supporting number of impact funds in Europe. From my perspective, and if you could comment, Espen, on that would be great. The also Norwegian pension fund does very good job in Europe, especially, and they try to show what trends should be, and I would be happy to listen a little bit from you, from your perspective, Norwegian perspective, for what's the role of the pension fund. But what I also see is that the role of private capital, of family offices, and that actually private capital in Western Europe, it's very involved in different impact investments. And why it's that important is that they show the trend, and everyone respects private capital. So private bankers starts to think, what should we do to make our offers to the family offices more attractive, funds, and etc. So that's that start to change. What do you think about it? How do you see the impulse? Who should push into more impact-driven mindset?
I think the EIF role is very important. I'll give you a clear example. We are investors in a fund in Denmark called the Social Capital Fund Invest. This is a standard private equity fund of about, I don't know, 45 million euros ish. And that fund has, in addition to the EIF as cornerstone, they have about 10 different foundations and trusts in Denmark and us. And these are the Novo Nordisk and the likes. So big company foundations, and also some private wealth. And this fund has a structure where they invest in creating jobs for people who are outside of the normal workforce, and the incentive to the fund manager is aligned with that. So the fund manager will only get their carried interest if the social goals are met. So there's a scale between 60 and 80%. If they get less than 60% attention of their goals, then they will not get any carry. All of it will go to charity. Over 80%, they will have reached their goals. They will get all the carry. Between 60 and 80, there's a sliding scale where a portion goes to charity, a portion goes to the fund manager. And I think creating structures in traditional fund management and traditional financial investing that incentivizes the players to make social or impact related decisions and to set impact goals, that really is key. And if you apply that same thing to pension funds and large players like, I don't know, the Norwegian pension fund, it's a bit different because they are clearly set up to deliver financial profit. I think in a few years we can see different, but for the time being, their only goal is to kind of get that little bit extra margin. I see more and more investors, fund investors, looking for financial and impact results. And the EVPA is a great advocate for that. We see it also in the GIN, the Global Impact Investors Network, learning from EVPA, getting much closer in the way they talk, the way they set the agenda, much closer to what EVPA does. So the role of the big organizations, big foundations, and the EIF and the likes, I think is very, very critical.
Yeah, I don't think I can add too much to that other than I think there are institutional investors who have increasing pockets of money to dedicate to this spectrum, let's say. I mean, I was discussing with some investors in private equity when I recently made my transition out of private equity because I'm no longer with enterprise investors, and there was some encouragement to say, well, we do have some pockets of money. Some of our clients, these would be like fund of funds, etc., family offices, who see that this whole space is an area where they want to diversify into, as I was mentioning earlier, and I think that money's available. So it's back to this chicken and egg problem of, if there's some supply from that side, is there demand on the fund side? So do we have a fund structure, professional team, etc., or a few of them that could absorb that capital? So yeah. I think these two forces will eventually come together because if the demand and supply is out there, it will connect at some point. But stimulants like EIF, or maybe we could even encourage EBRD. I mean, EBRD and EIF were the big, in Central Europe, they're the key sort of founding fathers, if you will, of private equity, venture capital industry. Something like that that could help then catalyze these other pockets of money, that could really be helpful. And maybe they take subordinated positions and so on to try to catalyze those other pockets. So I think those are discussions that should be had with those types of institutions.
Thank you. I have a number of my questions, but we also received the few from the audience, so I will ask them directly. That's actually very interesting also for me. Do you think that the venture capital portfolio model is suitable for impact investments, or rather these investments require more of private equity approach? It's why it's important. It's interesting for me is because we are focusing mostly on venture capital, and we are seeking for the opportunities here that we want to impact opportunities in venture capital.
I have a reflection on that. In our experience, to get a company from conception to profitability takes 10 years. It may take 6, but it's certainly not going to take 3. And if you have a venture fund, traditional venture fund with a 5-year investing period and a 5-year harvesting period, maybe 10+2 fund, then you may not be able to do that in the time available. And you end up missing out on the impact opportunity because you haven't got the time to follow it through to conclusion. So for me, I think if you set up a venture fund or try to do a venture capital investment in the sector, you really have to be more patient than usual, and to find investors who are willing to maybe go for an evergreen type of structure where you stay in the investment as long as you can add value, as long as you are on the impact journey. That really is important, and I think that what sets us apart from other investors in our sector in the Nordics. We don't really have to exit at a certain point in time. And we see others who do, and we see them struggling because they really want to stay in the business, but they cannot.
I guess my answer would be it really depends on where on that spectrum you are and what you're trying to achieve. If you go more to the left end of that spectrum, as I said earlier, I think that's where traditional private equity is moving more and more into not just, you know, basic ESG, but more kind of proactive ESG investing. And you say, okay, impact investing for me is good enough if, me as an investor, if an existing business, you know, large industrial company moves from its existing business into more impactful activities, then it's more of a private equity approach. The more you move to the right side of that scale, I think it's probably going to be about creating businesses, finding business entrepreneurs to create social businesses. So it's going to be more a venture capital type of activity. Hence the example Espen gave with his portfolio. That's clearly a venture capital type activity and very patient. I agree with that. So I think it really depends on your definition of what kind of impact you as an investor are seeking to have. I'm more and more saying, let's encourage people to develop a portfolio across that, because you don't have to be in just one category. You can be in multiple categories. Why not? And that can be diversify your portfolio where you say, okay, we take more risk with those startup businesses that are very, very, you know, invest for impact using EVPA terminology versus more traditional or existing businesses that become more impactful, which is more investing with impact and maybe more safe from a financial investment point of view. So why not build a portfolio across if we have product on the market to allow you to do that? So that would be my answer.
I will show you a little bit from our perspective, the venture a little bit different. Generally I agree that it requires patience, the social impact investments, but in venture capital, we have a number of mostly young people, under 30, under 35, people that are aware of all the environmental issues we have, the social issues we have, and people that usually try to solve it somehow. But there are a number of great products that people sometimes don't even recognize as something that can change people's life forever. And maybe that's not the great example as that was a fraud, but from the impact perspective, Theranos, the company that were building the machines to test blood, that the social impact would be incredible, and the value of the product would be incredible. Unfortunately, that's a fraud. But what I wanted to show you is that actually, I think also in venture capital market, people have to start thinking about social benefits that their product can provide. It's not about, and what I, as an investor in the venture capital, would like to see is the startups, including the information, how do they approach the social responsibility or environmental responsibility? How they affect it? Are they negative, positive, or neutral at least? Okay, I have a few more questions that I have to ask from the audience.
And
I have 1 more minute, I see.
Wait, Staszek, I am appearing because we have actually almost we run out of time. So I think, unfortunately, we have to.
Last one.
The last question, because we are already over the time. That's why I appear here as the ghost. So please, last question, and we wrap up.
So I wanted to ask you, that's the question from the audience. As an impact investor, would you invest in companies then that financial return is solely dependent on public subsidies, like, for example, PV farms? How do you see the role of public subsidies in accelerating the trend towards impact investments?
Who did you post that to?
Actually, both of you gentlemen.
I'll be very quick. I'll be very quick. We see the role of public subsidy as a part of the journey, but not the end goal. So we want to get away from public subsidy. We invest in businesses that have subsidy in the build-up to standalone businesses?
I think my answer would be very similar, that it's certainly in the space that Valores is acting in, public support, public funding is still pretty crucial in some of these spaces. But we try to work with those organizations to diversify away from that, get to more private funding sources. But again, looking at a wider perspective, I think some industries may just be reliant on public funding and public subsidies. Sometime in the past, green energy was relying on certain aspects of that just to exist. So it may just be part of the equation, and that has to be factored into the risk versus return of investing in that space. And part of the investment could be also looking at systemic change. One of the things we work on right now is trying to create change to actually engage public funding to address an area of working with persons with intellectual disabilities that just doesn't exist right now. So it's even a pre-step to getting to commercial funding, is just to make something happen in that space. And then we can think about later on down the road diversifying away from that.
And I think to add on to that, the public purse as a payer for a social impact, don't always look at it as a grant making or a subsidy unit. Look at it as the biggest possible buyer of these things you can possibly find. So if you get into public procurement and sell them a service that creates a better outcome for the citizens, then that is really unlocking a lot of funding. Huh?
And just to add to that, because many times the things that the organizations, the portfolio works on are actually substitutes for areas where government has failed. So exactly. It's actually natural in some cases that public funding is available to just extend the outreach of the local government where they are unable to address the issues.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much for all your answers and for everything you presented today.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. It was really great. We could stay much longer, but I really need to cut us off. I just want to say to all those who are still on the webinar that basically you have the access to the presentation, and you can review it. We will attach again the slides that Espen has been presenting. And I also want to encourage you all to dig through the resources that we have at our EPPA website. Just last week, we had a really good webinar on investment strategies, and actually a Hungarian impact investment fund has been presenting. And we just recently launched an Investing for Impact Toolkit. So for all the newcomers who are interested in this topic and want to engage, you can look at our website and get really a good guidebook. And the very fresh news, and we're going to collaborate and we'll discuss that in the future as well, is that there has been a new fund launched with the support of EIF, the European Social Innovation and Investment Fund, that has been launched by FASE, which is a German agency supporting social entrepreneurs. They started to be active in Central Europe as well. And the fund has did its first closing, 4 million euro. They are actually seeking for investors from other countries than Germany. So if you're interested, you have the website, you can look into it. I think it's really great initiative because they will be really targeting early stage social enterprises and businesses with impact. So there is a flow of money coming in, and I think a great opportunity for individual investors, individual people to engage as well. Also companies who can become also investors in this fund. So thank you for staying with us until now. We invite you to join the following webinars. The next one is in the beginning of December. And then we are planning another one for January already, also for journalists to learn more about this topic and to be able to write more about what's going on in the impact space. So thank you all. I hope to see you online soon. And in reality, probably not that soon. Stay healthy, take care of yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.